You read that title right. I bought Les Paul's personal Chibson. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. What a fun way to celebrate what would have been Les Paul's 110th birthday. This was sold at his estate sale in 2012 as an import copy. It was only expected to bring like $200 or $300, but as this sale went, you were lucky to get any sort of a trinket from this auction for $500. And when it came to the guitars, most things sold for like anywhere between 2 and 8 times market value. So even something junky, but with a funny tail like this, still brought $1,500 after shipping. This was lot number 502. And it only had 3 photos. Nobody knew if it was a bolt-on neck, what manufacturer it even was. So when Frank reached out to me saying, hey, I own Les Paul's Chibson. Do you want it? It's like, I try not to spend $2,000 on fakes, but this one I had to make an exception for because I was so curious. So, first impressions. Honestly, it's a lot cooler than I thought it was going to be. It is indeed a flat black paint, but it has this ashy-like wood grain to the top. Most Les Pauls don't have that. I was really hopeful Les was like toying around with fancy electronics in this, because unfortunately there's no story. I would imagine somebody said, hey, Les, look at this garbage fake. Do you want it as a gift? He's like, sure, I'll throw it in my collection hoard. Or maybe there's another reason why he kept this one, because this looks like your typical lawsuit era, late 70s into the 80s. You've got some interesting colorations to our fretboard. Those are acrylic material inlays. But yet, we definitely have an 80s Gibson logo thrown on this thing. Because that was the thing about the 70s and 80s. When people were knocking off Les Pauls, they were at least honest enough to put their own branding on it. For example, check out Hondo, Electra, among many of others. It really wouldn't surprise me if somebody added that decal to this, but maybe we can blacklight it to find out for sure. But here's our tape from the auction, so we know it's the same guitar, but here's the moment of truth. It's actually set neck, which is kind of cool, but I can certainly tell just by holding this, it's hollow, or it's one of those ones where the top has a gap underneath it before the body actually forms. I think the last time we saw that was when we documented the K Effector Les Paul. But just in case you're not familiar, Les Paul, he's a guy who invented multi-track recording. He's a very accomplished jazz guitarist and did many inventions throughout his life. He was born in 1915 and passed away in 2009. He's much more culturally significant than just the guitar that bears his name, although that's usually the first place that people learn of his legacy. His entire estate was liquidated through Julien's auctions in June of 2012. And in that auction, you could find so many cool things. Prototypes, number ones, freaky things that he experimented on. I actually have a video series that was segmented up into a few different episodes based on category if you want to check those out. As far as case candy, we even have the original auction hang tag that was seen right in front of it as people were bidding. An invitation card to the auction. And this is another reason I bought this. I've wanted one of these for my collection. The Estate Auction Manual. This is a giant book in and of itself. Now thankfully Julien's over the years has actually kept all of the listings online, but one day that might change. But this is essentially its own awesome book. There's even some flip out pages I've noticed. Well, here we go on page 277. There's our Chibson copy. And now it's here, going to be documented for the world to see. So let's go ahead and throw this one on the workbench and see what makes it tick. Here we go. Let's see what we can find out. Now, slightly controversially, I decided to clean it because it was dirty, disgusting. You really couldn't play it with those rusty strings. I did save them, but this thing's looking much nicer now. I feel that's the way Les would have wanted it. So let's check out these pickups together. Because in the photos, I saw the rounded off corners and got slightly excited because maybe he put vintage T-tops in here, but looking at it now, I really doubt it. And what is under here? Yeah, just your typical import weird epoxy pickup from the 70s and 80s. I do not expect too much out of this thing, but hey, at least it's there. But the cavities are most interesting to me. This tells us a lot when this was created, because look, this is a transitional neck tenon, so that means they were trying to copy pre-1975 Gibson construction with that. And mid-70s is like the peak of all this kind of stuff. But if anybody recognizes the manufacturer of this one by its cavities and things like this, feel free to chime in the comments. The bridge pickup route tells us a lot. At first I was like, oh no, am I wrong? Is it actually just a hollowed out body rather than what I was thinking? But no, You can see exactly what I was talking about right here. It's probably just solid here for our bridge and tail piece. But you can see that gap as well as our channel route. That goes on up through there to our toggle switch. But our bridge pickup is just more of the same goodness over here. I thought the shielding tubes were quite interesting. I imagine this was a rubber stripping, but it's kind of sticky now as it's aged. But the neck pickup has a red one. Your toggle switch wires has another yellow to match our bridge pickup. It's just a little bit thinner. But let's break out the endoscope, see if we notice anything else. My camera's just slightly too big to get in between this gap, but it helps show off what you're working with here. So looking close, it appears it's some sort of a laminate top, at least 2 different pieces of wood joining together there, maybe even 3. And I suppose to save money on the woods, they just leave that gap there to help create a little bit of a carve to the top. But the body itself, they route that before they put that on. And then, okay, this helps us get a slightly better view of just how many layers of woods they put over here. So you got the 3 darker layers and then the 3 light ones, and then how many they put on top. That, my friends, is called a plywood construction guitar. That's still cool to see. But hey, we do have some more fun. So in this area, there's another opening. So we can actually see around that area and see the multi-layering without the paint. And unfortunately, my camera just a little bit too big to really get too far in there. But that supports my hypothesis that we just have a little wooden block here to make sure everything has something to sink into. And then it's raised up due to the pressed top that they made. So kind of like an ES335, just on a Les Paul, predating the ES LPs. But now the big question, does everything work? The bridge pickup reads 8.81 k ohms, the neck position is 839, and then they play together at 4.29, so that is all peachy now. However, when Kevin first got this guitar, he said the neck pickup wasn't working, and what that ended up being is there was one loose wire. I'll show you it in a second, but I just decided to go ahead and solder it and fix it. But now, bridge and tailpiece time. This thing's really interesting. So think of an ABR1 bridge, but with just a giant post and a bushing in the body, and that's kind of what that is. They even came pretty close to making this look like a genuine ABR1. It's got the wire retainer, 6 individual saddles, no branding on the back, but a spot for it. The only big giveaway is the large metal posts. But the tailpiece is legit. This thing is heavy. It's got a long casting mark. I could see how somebody might actually confuse that for the real deal Gibson stuff. So props to the maker of this guitar for that. As far as our controls, is everything working here? I haven't actually tested, but I believe it'd be volume, tone, volume, tone. Now this tone, you hear that? You can jump between 10 and 0 on this. So I don't know if that's actually going to work or not. But if you're gentle with it, it stops where it's supposed to, but it's real easy to push it over. All the other ones work as intended as far as moving them at this point in time. But here's what she looks like with a pickguard off. I really like the look of this kind of ashy oak body. It works. The guard itself is kind of cheesy to an aficionado, because normally this hole should be like right there, and the hole for the upper bout would be a little bit over. Then check out our bracket. It's double stepped. This top screw is missing from it. That's how it was in the auction photos though. You could just barely see the golden through it, but if you were to have looked straight on, then you'd see nothing. But we do have 5-ply binding along the top, and if you were curious about the wood grain on the edge, it's similar to what we have on the top, but a bit more straight grained rather than being ringy. Here's the other side, rocking thin binding in the cutaway. Technically, just doesn't really have much of a real top to expose. And we've got that sunken in output jack. But oh, I forgot to talk about our toggle switch. Notice how obnoxiously tall this is. It's because it doesn't have a recessed nut. They utilize ones that bring it all the way up. So due to that, that's why the non-original chipboard case has that hole poked through it, so it would actually fit in it. And I'm not sure if Les put that on, but it is labeled Les Paul there with a label maker. But moving on from our body, we can move on to our neck. It appears to be some sort of a rosewood material, but this just came back to life after a little bit of a conditioning treatment. I doubt it's ever been conditioned in its entire life. However, somebody actually played this. You can see there's a bit of fingernail wear up here. Now, I'm not saying it's less, because most likely the story goes he was gifted this at one point in time. However, is there a small possibility that Gibson was thinking, hey, let's make our own import line, you know, before the Sonics, and this was that prototype? Maybe, but if that was the truth, we have not uncovered that tale yet, and I highly doubt that's actually the case. But wouldn't it be cool? But we've got the acrylic block inlays, and as far as acrylic goes, it looks pretty nice. I didn't notice tons and tons of fret wear, but the finish on the back of the neck had been glossed up. But our nut measure is 1.67 inches. Only 2 by the 12th. That is a pretty narrow neck. It's got a 0.84 first fret neck depth, increases to about 0.95 by the 12th. I personally measure closest to a 10-inch fretboard radius. But hey, at least they got the Gibson 24 3/4 inch scale length, right? There's a look at that neck profile at the first fret and the 12th fret. Definitely a slim C, but with a bit of a flatness to it. Moving on to our headstock. I was really hoping we would see a real truss rod in here, but no, it just says ick, which could have been an employee sign off or somebody else writing in it. But there is indeed your typical import truss rod in there. And it looks like we have 4-ply binding up here. And even though it looks similar to the Gibson open book headstock, it's not exact. And that's why I think the 70s and 80s lawsuit era guitars. I know there's some guys who hate that because technically there were no real lawsuits, but it's one way to reference the knockoffs of the 70s and 80s. They do have their own fan bases because they were their own unique thing. Modern day Chibsons that are just branded Gibson trying to look close enough to the real thing, I doubt those will ever have collectible or niche value to them the way that the 70s and 80s versions do. I can't wait for the blacklight test because I bet somebody added that after the fact. We might even find that they just redid the entire finish because the finish up here feels a little bit higher quality than everywhere else. I've got it strung back up with 9s. The truss rod cover is funny because it reminds me of the old Epiphone headstocks because the ears are clipped off the side over there, but it just reads custom. I think I found another reason why Les might have held on to this one. The action is just the lowest I've ever had. Because as is akin to 70s Les Pauls, they're known for low, wide frets. This one is similar to Fretless Wonder in the fact that they're not ultra wide, they're just super low. Like there's hardly anything to them at all. But due to that, you can have the action really low. And yeah, it's not fantastic for doing bends, but if you're just doing fast, jazzy, solo-y licks, yeah, I think you might have had some good fun times on this. Or maybe it's wishful thinking, but, for a knockoff import, this thing's actually really good. I was expecting it to be nearly unplayable, but the neck looks to be in good shape to me. Oh, and the binding along the headstock does the typical import thing where it goes underneath our nut there. But now flipping on over to the backside. We can see it's definitely multi-pieces because right where that ringiness starts and then that super circular, that's definitely a seam line. But hey, I will never bark at getting cool wood grain, especially on a guitar with as cool of a story of this one. So here's a look at our toggle switch cavity and the cheapy style 3-way switch that we've got going on in there. And then yeah, here's what we've got in there. It looks quite crazy. I'm not sure if that's how it left the factory or what. Somebody might have been doing some tinkering. But the wire that had came loose was this is our neck pickup. So it's a 2-conductor. This stuff was fine, the grounding, but it was this little white part that needed connected there. So I just reflowed the solder. Had I not told you, nobody would have ever known. But here's a good look at the main body wood portion, I guess you could say. Doesn't look like anything identifiable to me, but let's break out the endoscope again. See if we can find anything else out. So we do have some sort of a sign-off code, CH, and potentially a time, 2:35. But here's another look underneath it. So that's that multiply sandwich that we were looking at earlier where the bridge and tailpiece go into. But here's a nice look at the bare cavity here. No super surprises, but it's fun to see anyway. And here's that other area that we were looking at to the left of the bridge pickup cavity. And a close-up of the style of wood that they were using. And this is just that channel route that we had saw earlier. But looking up close here, it appears it might actually be 5-ply binding. It's just the black covered it over. But in most cases, it just looks like 4-ply. The back plates are also kind of interesting because usually they're just single-ply material, but this one's actually 2, so it's white on the back. Same thing is true for our slightly misshapen back plate for our controls. So you could technically do that. I think that looks kind of cool. But I'm going to leave it as Les had it, including the upside-down ABR1 style bridge. That's probably just how it shipped from the factory. I actually put it on the other way and I was like, I have to do it the way he had it. But outside of that, we've got these interesting strap buttons. Can't say I've ever seen these before, but that might help identify the maker to someone. They're in our usual locations. They were all really loose, so I just went ahead and re-secured them. Just needed a couple of turns. But even before cleaning, this area was slightly more buffed up, so it was rubbing against somebody. And we've got some sort of a scratch over here. And then take a look at the flat nature of the finish here. and then as compared to the neck. As we come up here, you can see the headstock actually is the regular flatness. So as I was telling you earlier, somebody had to have played this at least enough to buff that up. But to be fair, that doesn't really take that long to do. Also, if you look really closely right here, you can see a join line. So they definitely crafted the neck and then the headstock on top of that. I'm not going to make any claims as to what any of the woods are on this guitar, because who knows. But the tuners actually do feel quite nice. Some of them are a little bit stiff, but I was expecting worse. But it's labeled G143. No other traditional serials. But now perhaps the most fun part of tonight's episode, the blacklight test. Man, that really shows off the wood grain this thing has beautifully. It's looking like there's a seam line potentially right there. I'm sure there's another one over here somewhere. 3-piece tops were the norm in that era. So it would make sense that a knockoff company would want to redo that. But now our headstock. So we've got a little bit of weirdness going on right there. I forgot to point this out. Right by that tuner, there's like a bunched up area that it looks like there's like a nail or something in the wood. But from what I'm seeing here, something's definitely happened up here. I don't know exactly what, but it probably has something to do with why this has a real Gibson decal. Now coming on to the back. Man, I'm really glad I remembered to do the blacklight test. That just shows you all the wood grain beautifully. Not much over here, but nice stuff over there. Perhaps this will help you see the edges a bit too. But as far as mysterious blacklight markings, not really seeing much in that case. There's another join line for however millions of pieces this body actually is. Now the back of the neck looks like we might have some stand rash marks or something. More glow in there, but no breaks, cracks, or repairs. Not that it really matters. The draw to this is Les Paul owned it. But all said and done, Les Paul's personal Chibson weighs a back-saving 8 pounds, 6.1 ounces. Not too bad. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and see if there's any decent tones in this. Do you notice what's wrong with it? Wrong. The pickups are out of phase in the middle position. Oh, and as far as our controls, neck position. Want to roll that down a bit? Volume control doesn't do anything. How about your tone? It's pretty much an on-off switch. At least it still works both ways. As far as your bridge, it works about as much as I would expect it to. Tone. Same story there, so neck position's all messed up, but hey, at least the pickup's working again. Overall, I'd say that neck position's my favorite. It sounds better than I was expecting it to, anyway. But now let's hit it with some dirt. You can definitely hear the microphonicness of this pickup. But so far it's not really squealing in the room, so the good kind of microphonic in a roundabout way.
Especially if you want to talk to your audience. Same thing going on with your neck.
I'm not going to say the out of phase sounds fantastic, but it has a certain nastiness to it that can be fun on occasion. So there we go, Les Paul's personal Chibson documented on the show. It's far from the most historically significant guitar out of his estate sale, nor was it the most expensive, but I gotta say it's probably the most hilarious one, because what was he doing with this thing? I know he had a few other weird oddball ones that he liked to modify, but this is his tried and true Les Paul shape that belongs to him. There's gotta have been some sort of a story here. I will say though, this was better than I was expecting it to be, because I thought for sure this would be some cheapy bolt-on neck type thing. The action, I would argue, is too low. It probably should be raised a bit. But if you're not trying to do strummy chords, it actually works so well for things that I'm not very skilled at doing. We're talking lead work, single note stuff. This would have been perfect for Les. And maybe this video will find who gifted it to him, or maybe it will remain a mystery forever, but I hope you enjoyed it anyways. If you're new to the show, I do videos like these every single day, whether it's a review and documentation or just looking at some stuff online. This is my guitar journey and this is what I do. So I hope you enjoyed, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.